This program was made possible by the Florida Humanities Council. We come from all over, and we become one state, where we share in the history and become part of the culture that is Florida. The Florida Humanities Council, bringing Floridians together by sharing the stories of our state. And by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Life is different in a beach town. Days are not measured in minutes or hours. The rhythm of the rolling waves and the soft sway of the sea oats keep time. Time moves slowly, but sometimes change comes quickly. Cities by the sea have long struggled to maintain their unique identities as new developments join the fabric of their town. How do residents hold on to a sense of community as the growth of their city ebbs and flows? Through the years, Jacksonville Beach has been many things. A retreat for city dwellers, a resort for vacationing visitors, and for others, simply home.
I love the fact that all of our roads are 35 miles an hour or less, so when you come back to the beach, you slow down and life gets a little more laid back.
Jacksonville Beach is family orientated, it's very clean, and the people are very warm. And if you come to Jacksonville Beach, you don't want to leave.
What makes this community unique is the closeness of the community, the working together of the community.
We think we're really blessed with this grid street pattern because it affords such wonderful access to the beach, and you know, every 200 or 300, 250, 300 feet there's a place for you to get to the beach, and in most cases you can actually park there.
Those street ends give access to the ocean and visually and even the sounds for 10 or so blocks back into Jacks Beach. So Jacks Beach feels like a beach in the larger sense.
One of the great things about Jacksonville Beach is its abundant public access. It's one of the most accessible beaches I've seen in the state of Florida. It's got a real friendly vibe to it, a lot of families, a lot of kids. It's actually a great beach for surfing. A lot of people don't realize that.
Jacksonville Beach is about 20 miles east of downtown Jacksonville. Though many who live here commute to town for work, most residents prefer life at the beach.
The slang expression is that once you cross the ditch, you just don't have a desire to go back in.
The ditch is the intercoastal waterway. Now, the reason we call it the ditch is because starting just south of here, when they brought all that heavy equipment back from the Panama Canal after the turn of the century, they actually cut a ditch to connect Jacksonville with St. Augustine, so vessels going south in the intercoastal waterway, barges and whatnot, could go inside instead of having to go out in the ocean. It looks just like a big ditch, so that's where it got the name.
And beach people are typically don't want to cross the ditch and want to support each other.
In the early days, it wasn't very easy to get to Jacksonville Beach, but that was part of the lure. Developers recognized the potential of the area as a getaway for wealthy residents from town, and in the 1880s chartered the Jacksonville and Atlantic Railway Company to build a narrow-gauge railway to what was then known as Ruby Beach. By 1886, the town was renamed Pablo Beach, and the first resort hotel, Murray Hall, was open to the public. Millionaire Henry Flagler spurred even greater development when he took over and improved the railroad. Thousands came on summer weekends by train, and after the completion of Atlantic Boulevard in 1910, by car.
Cars were in a very primitive state back then. For an automobile to make the trip out to the beach was an adventure in and of itself. Trying to avoid marshes and swamps and mud and wildlife.
And people did that because it was hot in Jacksonville, and they could come out here and they at least had the ocean breeze. it cooled them off. When people went swimming, they had on these long dresses and whatever they were required to wear back in those days.
We have a picture of my grandfather standing on the street downtown about 1914, and of course the street's sand. He actually had the drugstore and then owned a hotel slash restaurant slash penny arcade slash bar. And when my dad was growing up in the 20s, they would come out on Memorial Day and take the doors off the hinges and would be open for business 24/7 until Labor Day, when they would put the doors back on the hinges and go back to Jacksonville.
The 1920s was a decade of prosperity, and Florida became a popular vacation destination. Visitors came to Pablo Beach for the waterfront amusement park, wooden roller coaster, and fishing pier. Town leaders changed the name of the community to Jacksonville Beach in 1925, hoping an association with the nearby city would boost its efforts to attract tourists.
My folks were owners of property right on the boardwalk, Perkins House, the old Perkins Hotel and everything, in the bathhouse. That's where we were raised, right on the boardwalk. I'm a boardwalk brat. It was a little slow in the beginning, as a matter of fact. People only came down like on Sunday for a while. Back in the 30s and 40s, it was sort of a Sunday place to go. And then as people began to have a beach house down here, they came down on the weekends and just sort of evolved.
The tourist side of things is important, but it's cyclical. Because weren't here all year round, it was a different kind of tourism. It wasn't like Miami Beach or even Palm Beach, because the climate in the winter is not always hospitable to people who are looking for, warm weather. So although tourism was important, it wasn't the one and only thing. So the community had to figure out a way to sustain itself by working either in Jacksonville or creating the opportunities at the beach.
In the 30s, the whole tourist idea ebbed dramatically. But at the same time, the New Deal came on out of Washington, and there was federal funding to build local infrastructure, if you will. And the Jacksonville Beach had an elementary school, but they didn't have a high school. And as a sense of community grew at Jacksonville Beach, they sought permission from Duval County to build Duncan Fletcher High School.
The school opened in, I think, 37. My mother graduated from Fletcher in 1939, but she lived at the beach, but she'd been going to Jacksonville to Landon High School. So when she had the chance to stay at the beach, boy, that was wonderful. And she actually chose the school colors, purple and white.
There's very few families at the beach that don't have some experience at this school, that have some relationship. Either the grandparents went to school here, the grandparents and the parents did.
The difference is that there is no competing educational institution to Fletcher. There's not another high school, so there's not a sense of rivalry. That's the unique part of it is that we live on this side of the ditch. We went to school on this side of the ditch, and whenever we were going in on the other side of the ditch, it was kind of an us versus them type of thinking.
Fletcher became a cultural institution for white families at the beaches. African Americans had their own elementary school, but until the mid-60s had to go into Jacksonville for high school. The boardwalk and public beaches were also segregated.
We lived 2 or 3 blocks from the ocean. We couldn't go to the ocean and couldn't dip our toe in. That was prohibited. And if you did, and then somebody saw you, you would be arrested for going down. And there are signs, hotels and so forth, white only.
African Americans created a bustling business and entertainment district of their own in a neighborhood known as the Hill. Despite serious racial inequities, race relations in Jacksonville Beach were not as contentious as in other parts of the South, or even just a few miles away in Jacksonville.
It was interesting. We had integration when I was in high school, but it was more because the black kids that lived at the beach, we all knew them anyway, and there wasn't anywhere else for them to go to school, so they went to school with us. It was before it was really ordered so much, and there was never any problems because everybody knew everybody anyway.
You've got to remember one thing that's a little different between the integration that occurred at the beach as opposed to Jacksonville proper is that there were smaller numbers of Afro-Americans. And so it was easier for them to accept us because we were less in number.
World War II was a catalyst for change throughout Florida. Jacksonville Beach benefited from the opening of Mayport Naval Station, which created jobs and brought families to live in the area. This period marked a transition for Jacksonville Beach. What had been a tourist destination began to feel more like a suburban community.
That Jacksonville Beach residents have a great deal of civic pride is evidenced by the many parks and civic buildings, as well as banks, clubhouses, and so forth.
Year-round residents felt a connection to each other and to their city. In 1968, when the Jacksonville city government consolidated, Jacksonville Beach chose to remain separate.
We had the option of consolidating. It was put to the vote. It was like, not even close.
I remember that there was a lot of controversy for a while. Everybody wanted to not be identified with Jacksonville in that way. They didn't want to be Jacksonville, they wanted to be Jacksonville Beach. And I think it had a whole lot to do with the history. We had, by then, a lot of history, good history, that people like to remember, and they wanted that. And we had a large enough group, so they prevailed.
If they were part of the consolidated city, they would be a very small part. And so they voted to maintain their identity, while at the same time accepting that Jacksonville would become their county. So that Jacksonville-Duval County is the county for the beaches and provides library services, for example, and a certain amount of police protection. But at the same time, they maintain their autonomy. The price for that is a higher tax rate.
In the late 80s, there was this sense that we were being neglected. And there was a separatist movement that was generated, saying we need to break off former owned county, and dubbed itself Ocean County. And they did some studies on, what would it cost to build a jail and a police force.
And that was actually a lovely idea, not very practical, but I love the sentiment of it. It just wouldn't have ever worked.
And one of my first objectives was resolve these disputes, sit down and make this go away. And I probably had a little bit of credibility in that I'd lived at the beaches.
I think that what's unique is that even though we are a part of the city of Jacksonville, the incorporated city of Jacksonville, we have our own identity, and even each beach community, the 4 beaches communities here, Atlantic Beach, Neptune Beach, Jacksonville Beach, and Mayport, all have their very individual personalities. Jacksonville Beach is seen as the anchor for the beaches. When people think of the beaches, they think of Jacksonville Beach.
It used to be you would say, well, Jacksonville Beach is a little bit more blue collar. We're a little bit more, Atlantic Beach, they're kind of, people would say, I wouldn't say, because lots of my friends, I have many friends down there as I do anywhere else, say, Atlantic Beach is all snooty, they don't want to, they don't want to do this, do that, and Neptune Beach is a little tiny little thing, and Jacksonville Beach is more blue collar. I think you can get away with a little bit more in Jacksonville Beach than you can either one of those, because we're more used to it a little bit. We've got a big public beach here, which and lots of parking, which none of those other 2 cities really have. When 50,000 people come down from Jacksonville to go to the beach in the summer, you'll have a bunch come here, and there'll be just a few in Neptune Atlantic Beach because there's just not much parking. There's nowhere for them to go. So we wind up with our population doubling sometimes on the weekends here. So it gets a little raucous, and we've got a really large police department for that reason, because we get that great influx in the summer, especially on the weekends.
What I've always said is we want people to come to Jacksonville Beach, have a great time, just don't leave your manners at home. And we do have to deal with people who have left their manners at home. They come to the nightclubs, they have a little bit too much to drink, and then they have a disagreement with someone, which leads to assaults, fights, batteries.
The nightclubs, bars, and restaurants that make up Jacksonville Beach's lively entertainment industry are carrying on a tradition started in the earliest days of this community along the boardwalk.
In some ways, they were just as much trouble as the crowd we have now. Although people think about the good old days, I was down here in the 60s when on a Saturday night you couldn't walk down the boardwalk because you had to dodge all the people. There were literally 10,000 people down here.
You have to understand, back in the days, we did not have strip malls or anything. Only two things you had to do here in Jacksonville, either go downtown. If you didn't go downtown, you came to the beach. And a lot of people, they was here at the beach. That whole town, that was it. It's packed.
Yeah, you know, you just had, so much activity down there every night. And it was a great place for the guys on the ships to come in and have a place to go to meet people that were not from this area.
Whereas Miami Beach might draw wealthy New Yorkers, we would draw middle class and upper middle class Southerners.
People who came to my grandmother's hotel, for instance, the same people came back year after year, and there would be groups. There was a grocery chain called Colonial Stores, and the Colonial Stores girls came every summer, and families came every summer, and family groups, and they would you just knew when they were going to show up.
And we used to have the old Jacksonville Beach Pier that they called it the Dancing Pier. It had a big Quonset hut-shaped roof on it and a 2,000 square foot dance floor. And they had Benny Goodman there. They had all sorts of famous musicians there.
It was a great place. I mean, I kind of like grew up there because my uncle owned, at one time, he owned 4 different places on the boardwalk. But back then it was just, like carefree and everybody having a good time. And you could drive vehicles up and down the beach, park on the beach, and it was a lot of fun,
And then in 1964, Hurricane Dora came through, and we used to have the Ferris wheels, the roller coasters right here on the beach. But when Hurricane Dora came through and tore it all down, they decided not to rebuild.
Once you got Disney going and all those other sorts of things, people sort of went, well, that's where we want to go. And this became less and less of an attraction and went further and further downhill. And if you weren't getting those folks coming, the merchants started having to cater to other sorts of things, and it got to be more and more bars, and it just went downhill.
Families just didn't want to come down to Jacksonville Beach. There was an air of seediness in the area, particularly here in the downtown area.
The entertainment industry along the oceanfront went into a decline and became characterized by lack of upkeep, lack of maintenance, and almost an embarrassment. And for a while there, the other beach communities looked at Jacksonville Beach as the poor sister of the beach communities.
Well, I came here 25 years ago in 1985, and certainly the community redevelopment efforts were, at that time were probably in their 10th or 12th year. What I saw when I got here was probably the most unique beach community on the East Coast, in that there was very little in the way of businesses. Buildings were boarded up. The infrastructure, the roads and the water and the sewer and the storm drainage, even the electrical systems were extremely substandard.
We came in 88, we opened March 8th of 88. The power thing was a real big thing. We'd be cooking and all of a sudden, boom, the transformers would blow because it's just so much and so much you're putting on them. And they got around to getting everything caught up where we all could keep rolling. But we thank the Lord we have gas, so we keep cooking anyway.
It's transformed, and there's a couple of people that really should get a lot of credit for that. One is Bill Latham, the former Jacksonville Beach mayor. And he just went into office and said, this has got to go. We've debated this for so many years. We've had so many false starts. We can't get a consensus. Let's just pick a direction. Even if it's wrong, let's just go this way.
We came in right there at the end of the 80s and started doing a lot of infrastructure work. Said, okay, how do you bring an area back? The government's not really good at business, so let's do things that government does. We had some redevelopment areas, so we got to use tax increment dollars, which are dollars we get back from the county that otherwise we wouldn't get. So what are we going to do? And in '89 we said, well, lots of wild plans out there, but let's do what government does. Let's do infrastructure.
And we thought, hey, listen, let's get this thing going by creating an event that people can enjoy and be proud of and safe at, that they'll want to come to, they'll want to come back to, they'll want to bring their friends and family to. And we felt that that would be a good catalyst to get redevelopment started, and sure enough, that's what happened.
As the redevelopment began in the mid-90s, so they created or sponsored a number of festivals in the springtime, to the point where we probably had one just about every weekend starting in late March and running into May. But over the years, as our brand has become more established, we didn't feel the need for all of the festivals.
We created them to bring people here to see the possibilities, to see the potential, and to patronize the businesses and to bring in investment. And once they came in and they built the hotels, they built the restaurants, so then the wisdom of the city council and the city leaders said, okay, we're on a roll, we're doing things, let's not screw it up. And it made the most sense to focus on our premier events and to let the other ones go, to allow that this beautiful area that was created to be open and available to anybody.
City leaders and residents had worked for decades to redevelop their blighted downtown beachfront, but their success brought rise to new struggles. The area was poised for unprecedented growth as developers purchased dozens of properties with plans for new high-rise condominiums. Many longtime residents felt the character of their community was at stake and decided to fight.
I would walk on the beach, and in the afternoon there was no sunshine. And I was surprised, and I looked around, and there's some tall buildings that had me in the shade. I could see, well, for people that like to sunbathe, that these tall buildings were taking that away.
I think it definitely got overbuilt very, very quickly, and the permitting perhaps wasn't as restricted as it could have been. I think a lot of things came in, squeaked in, and we have too many big oceanfront condominium buildings that don't have people living in them.
I think people just got tired of high-rises. And there was a group that got together and said, well, we need to do something about it because government's not being responsive to what we think. The group that got together went out and got enough signatures, 2,000 or so signatures, to put an amendment on the ballot for the 2004 election that basically said that 35 feet was the height limit and that you couldn't build above that.
Our organization realized that change was going to happen, and change is always good, but we wanted to make sure that the citizens were involved in what that change was.
What we decided to do was to buy some properties and renovate them and make it a retirement activity, and move to Jacksonville Beach and enjoy the changes, the redevelopment. My plan was to buy them, own them, improve them, operate them, and then at some point either redevelop them myself or sell them to someone else who might. The more I thought about the fact that specific rights that I had purchased and bought were being removed, I started to feel I really should do what I could about it, even though I wasn't particularly optimistic.
No one had any idea it was going to be the way it was. It was just overwhelming. That's unheard of. I mean, you just don't get 70-something% on anything. Imagine. And the turnout being just an astronomical. I can't give you the numbers, but it was astronomical.
If 76% of the people in Jacksonville Beach are happy to ignore the fact that getting a 35-foot height cap removes rights and privileges that I had bought and paid for and worked on, then it's a little hard to get totally excited about the general civic welfare.
The vote felt personal to some whose earlier investments had helped the city improve its image. Developers rushed to get their permits, and more than 20 condominium projects were underway by the time the amendment passed. Those who didn't beat the deadline believe their properties lost millions of dollars in value on that day.
And there are a very small number of people that had a significant interest in the properties that were most adversely affected. Certainly nowhere near a majority of the voting population. So I think it's a case, in my opinion, where direct democracy didn't necessarily result in a in an appropriate outcome.
There's some downsides to it because I think some places in the downtown area, perhaps some development could be done at 50 feet that'd be really cool. There's a place right down here that's for 4 or 5 stories that has shops and stuff on the bottom floor and parking, and then like 3 floors of residences, and there's a little bit of a lost opportunity there, I think.
Obviously there were concerns, but we think that people will see in time, the ones that have the concerns, that we can have a great community and one that will grow in value with what we have. I think a lot of things have improved. Certainly the City Council and the citizens have a very open line of communication. We see citizen involvement has improved and has grown quite a bit, and we see the City Council being very open to what citizens have to say.
Now more than ever, there's a strong sense of community pride in Jacksonville Beach. Both residents and visitors enjoy a wide range of cultural institutions, with world-class venues for visual artists, cutting-edge community theater, and a thriving live music scene. Those who live here are optimistic about the future of their city, with its challenges and opportunities.
You know, I really like everything about it. I like that you knew it was going to fill up. You knew that was going to happen. You certainly, as an islander, you certainly wanted to stay small, but you knew it wasn't going to. And it's kind of grown with character, and I think it's happened gradually, and it's been graceful.
Recently, we completed a vision plan for focusing on our downtown area, and with the process that we went through, identified a number of community values, among those being family-friendly, walkable, emphasizing the recreational potential of our beach. So carrying that forward, then we've come up with what we call a vision for our downtown, and we're now busy trying to implement that vision.
We do have to contend with, growth, more and more people coming. How do we preserve, what we have? We can only fit so many people in any one space, and I think that's going to be a challenge for the future.
Challenges our city faces are the same ones that we've had for a number of years now. We have a homeless population that continues to grow.
I think the greatest challenge that we have is, preserving the quality of life that we have and keeping it affordable. With all the, the economy, with the downturn in the economy.
I hope that as we move forward, that people do appreciate our heritage and the background and the richness of diversity in this community.
The great thing about this community is this, is that we love it enough to protect it enough so that we can be responsible to the future generations coming for this community.
Florida beach communities share common struggles. Growth is inevitable. The challenge is determining how best to grow. This town's rich history proves that a sense of community can survive, even against the inescapable tides of change.
This program was made possible by the Florida Humanities Council. We come from all over, and we become one state, where we share in the history and become part of the culture that is Florida. The Florida Humanities Council, bringing Floridians together by sharing the stories of our state. And by the National Endowment for the Humanities,